Hi and welcome back to step 3 of this full stack coding along example. Again, we have prepared the Express API. We have a register route, we have a login route. Now we're going to use our form to communicate with that Express API. So if we open up our code, you see that we have a frontend folder. We're now going to be focusing and working in that. Make sure your server is running so we can actually communicate with it. But for all the rest, you can close all those files. We don't need to be in the backend code anymore because the register and the login function are working. Now, we are going to focus on the login.js, which is empty for now, and the login.html. I will open the login.html with live server, and this will show me a login page. So ignore the buttons at the top. Here we will make some or add some email addresses. So I think it was mike@ehb.be, and in the password will be, I think it was test1234. So if I click on login, we need to get a message back. How do we do that? Well, let's get started. Let's check the question first. So open up login.js and add an event listener on the login form that does the following: prevent default behavior, retrieve the values, and let's start with there. The fetch will come later. So these are things we've done in the first lesson. So I'm gonna go over quite fast in this one. So again, I have loaded in login.js with defer, so that means we can just do documents dot get element by ID. Let me check if my login page, what form, login form is it called? No capitals. Okay. Again, login form, and then dot add event listener, and the event listener will be event done. We're going to prevent the default behavior, prevent default, prevent default. And I think we should be able to retrieve the fields. I'm going to do it step by step, field by field. I think that's the most easy to do. So example input field email, example input field password. I'm just going to change those to something more easy. Input email and input password. And fixing the labels. Voila. So again, email, input, password. So that means we now have very clear descriptions. Const email and const email equals documents get element by ID, input email, put email dot value. And we're going to do the same for password. And now we have the values. Let's test that out before we continue. So console log email password. All right, take a pause to copy this over if you have not already, and then we're going to test it out. So in this case, we have the it was an edge that I was testing. Okay. Failed to add event listener. Oh, of course, I already know which error this is, and somebody who has been coding along should get this. An event listener has two properties. Two parameters. One is the callback function, but the first one is, of course, the event. Now, think again. What kind of event are we listening to? The click of a button, the hover of a button, the submit of a button. All three are wrong. We are listening to the submit event of the form. So submit, save, and I don't care what this key is, so let's ignore that. Mike ehb. Password is test1234. Login, and you can see we have the values. Now it starts to get real cool because now we can actually communicate with our API. So as I do with most of my functions that handle requests, I will make an asynchronous function that handles the data. So in my case, async function gets data, pass along a URL so we can reuse it later. And then we can do let's response equals fetch URL. And we're going to wait for that fetch. So wait. So now we have nice and synchronous code. And we're going to return await resp.json. So we can convert it to JSON as well. So this is something we saw in the previous exercises. This will allows us to get the data from a URL and actually convert it to JSON. So after this, check for login. We are going to do the fetch one. So that means I am going to get data from a URL. The URL being, and this is important, of course, our backend, which is localhost 3000. If you have not hosted your API, then this is, of course, the only way you can test this is when you are running the server on your local machine. So in my case, HTTP localhost 3000, and we're going to do the login route. Once that is done, we are going to get the data and just console log the data once it gets back. Again, what are we doing? We are doing a fetch to a URL, login, and once it returns the JSON, we will catch it here and do something with it. Spoilers, this is not going to work, as we will see in a second. The EHB email password tests 1, 2, 3, 4. Login. Uncaught syntax error. Not valid JSON. 404 not found. Take a moment to guess why this is not working. If you have guessed correctly, you should know that the login route is a post request and not a get request. So we have to change some things up to do a post request. So after the URL, this is only for, let's do it get post data. So we know, oh, you know what? We can even fine tune it. Let's do the URL and then post. It's a bit more flexible. Again, try to make your functions as flexible as possible. So the method will be, in this case, post. So that means we can build it in here. If you go to the documentation of I'm blanking on it, of the fetch call, then you should be able to see that you can add more stuff into this. Again, we are missing multiple things. Namely, we have the URL, we have the post, but we also have to pass along an object. And that object is email and password. So let's create an object here. Instead of going with this, let's user equals an empty object. And then user.email will be filled in and user.password will be filled in. Why is this value is never read? Okay, well, now we have an object with two things, and you know what? We will pass along that object. Cannot redeclare block scope variable. Do I have a user? Oh, I'm using const. That's not smart. Okay, so we have a user, we're adding email and password, and we're doing a data call to this URL with this method with this data. Again, finishing our fetch at the moment. We have our method, which is post. We have our body, which is the stringified version of that object. Again, these are just how to do get and post requests with fetches. You should have done this in the past. Now we're just going to, I'm just going to call this data. If we have something to pass along, it's this data, URL, method, and data. Let's see what it does. All right, let's go. Let's test it in here. We have test. We have the email, we have the password, which is test1234, and let's see what happens. Bad requests. Some fields are missing. Oof, and we're seeing our server crash here as well. That's not good. Spoiler again, I knew that this would happen. Again, we're missing some things, but again, this is part of the process of developing. You're going to run into some things, and we're going to try to fix them. So 401 unauthorized bad request. Some fields are missing. Let's see what it says. Not much. So let's try it again. Cannot set headers after they have been sent to the client. Okay. What I can tell you is that it requires JSON data. So there's something, there are some headers we can set that allow for the content type to be JSON, so that our Express API immediately knows, hey, you're speaking a language I understand. You are using JSON data. So content type equals application/JSON. Let's restart our server here. Done. I will show you the code in a minute. And now we can test it out. So here we are, we have everything filled in. Let's try to log in. Authentication error. This is the one that I wrote. No user with this email has been found. Make sure you register first. Authentication error. This is exactly my error message. So that means it works because we have not registered. Now take with you the Postman, where we have our register function already saved. Let's try and send that. Saved. So that means it's now in the memory. If we go back to our website, I'm going to clear the console here, and I'm going to press login again. Authentication successful. You are successfully logged in. So this is the result. Now we are calling our API, passing along data, and that data is getting checked, in this case, through a array at this point. And when it finds a user, it will send back a success message. Perfect. Now we have, this is full stack communication. So the front end and the back end in this folder, let's finalize with this here. This folder of front end will not communicate directly with this folder. It's basically as if they don't know they exist, but they communicate through the fetch API. You are making a request to a server that is located on your PC, and that server is going to do things that you wrote in this code here, the login code, the register code. At the end, it's going to send back a response, and you're going to catch that response in here and convert it back to JSON. So they don't know each other. Like I said, HTTP connections are stateless and are connectionless, because you just send a request and you get a response back. So now that you know how to communicate, let's go. The first part is now finished. Let's go to the second part where we will not only finish the whole register and login process, but also attach a database to it. See you in the next video.